all three of those levels. And it's not something that can be claimed. Yeah. So I think.
Hello and welcome to our midweek shot of Marketing Street Knowledge that we call Think Like a Brand from the Rockstar CMO F'in Marketing Podcast, where we discuss thinking like a brand, specifically in industries that often don't. Who are we? Well, in a moment you'll hear from my chum Liz High, an insight ninja, marketing strategist, speaker and author who has worked with some amazing brands and more recently has focused on supporting fintechs, banks and credit unions to embrace brand thinking, and is the co-author of Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank, hence the name of this podcast. And I'm your host, Ian Truscott, sharing the marketing street knowledge I've picked up in my 20-year career from techie to CMO. And you can find us both on LinkedIn. Just search for Rockstar CMO or click on the links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com. This week, Liz and I chat about brand is the business case and the commercial value of having a strong brand. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Welcome back, Liz, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Just recovering from Thanksgiving dinner. So, maybe it's heavier and a little bit poorer, but had a wonderful long weekend.
Splendid. And are you all ready for the... Because we've had quite a busy few days, because on Friday, obviously, we had the football, and we were talking about that last week, which was torturous for both teams.
Yes, it was not the outcome I had hoped for, but it is what it is, and Tuesday is another day.
Yes, and we're all ready for Tuesday. All right, so I didn't get you back on the show to talk about football, obviously. We're still talking about your book in our little Think Like a Brand mini-series, and one of the things I wanted to focus on, you suggested we focus on, let's get it right, is I genuinely, I really like the beginning of the book, I like the whole book, but I really like the beginning of the book where you talk about the business case and making a brand. The brand is the business case. So we're going to focus on this. And you talk about the Cantor report that you're really into, but I know you've seen a different study now. So should we start with that?
Yeah, sure. So, I think that the idea that brand is the business case, and actually I've got to give all credit to Alison, my co-author. That's one of her mantras, as a CMO in a tech business, just really continuing to reinforce that, focusing on your brand and investing in your brand gets greater returns. And I said, huge fan of the Cantor Brands report, but also a really interesting read this year is the Interbrand Best Global Brands Research.
And where does that come out?
Good question. It came across my desk maybe about a week or so ago, but I can't remember the exact date of publishing, but definitely worth the read.
Okay. So I'll include a link to that in the show notes. But what is it about those reports you really like? I mean, I know you explain it in the book, but for the listener out there.
Well, I find it very heartening that, I don't know about you, but everything that comes into my inbox right now is doom, gloom, economy shot, fintech shot,
Yeah.
And when I looked at this, one of the really cool things is if you looked at the top 100 brands in 2022 compared to their value in 2021, they've increased 16%. And the top 100 brands are now valued at over $3 trillion.
Wow. Well, so the point there is, even though, and is this set? Do you think it's set to increase? I mean, it's been a weird few years, right? So these are difficult economic times. So you're saying that the value of brands goes up even when we're going through this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you're focused on the right things, and we'll talk about what those are in a minute, then you are able to ride out, and not just ride out, but grow and benefit from difficult times.
Right.
The brand mindset helps with that.
Yeah, and I know that both of these reports, they cover off these sort of big brands, but do you think that's not an anomaly, right? The premise here is that brand has a value to your business, and that value, if you do the right things, is going to increase. And it's like an economic indicator, isn't it, of your brand, of your company, is the value of your brand. So how do we make a valuable brand? What are you just intimated there are some things we need to do. What are the things we need to do?
Well, what's really interesting from the interbrand perspective is they really focus on, they talk about internal and external factors. And they really kind of double down on the concept of showing leadership.
Okay.
So the idea that, your organization, has a very clear direction, that the organization is aligned around the brand, that you really focus on exuding empathy, and most important, that you are ready and able to be agile. So actually think about, speed to market, ability to respond to what's changing in the world.
So demonstrating the capability to be a market leader. I mean, both of us have hung out in B2B tech. This isn't that bullshit where we say we are the leading vendor of blah, 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 right? This is actually demonstrating leadership in your category. In your category,
within your culture.
Right.
And with your customers as well. So it kind of has to cover all three of those levels. And it's not something that can be claimed, So I think you and I, between us, have probably written many messaging and positionings that talk about being the agile leader that empathizes with the market, but that isn't what it's about. It's about exhibiting.
Right. And is that in terms of the brand principles or brand values that you have, that these are things that you need to be able to prove that you do, rather than,
It's the same thing.
I just should indicate to the listener that you're nodding, and that's what I'm referring to. So just now you said the word agile, which obviously is vastly overused a lot of the time. But what do you mean by, where's the agility in leadership? What do you mean by that? Is that the ability for brands to sort of pivot when things happen in the market and world events happen and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. But it's also not just responding. It's a little bit about anticipation and thinking about the concept of foresight. So if you're really focusing on what's coming down the line, not just what's happening right now, then you can respond and proactively make a difference and reposition your brand when you need to.
Right. So that was, you said there were three factors. So that was the first one. So demonstrating leadership, being able to show yourself and demonstrate yourself as a leader in the category. What's your second one?
So the second one, and these fall under the kind of the external. The first one is engagement. And the second one, they talk about relevance, but I think my feelings on it's not really relevance, it's resonance that you need to think about. So I would kind of say it's about how you engage and then how you resonate with the market.
Right. And what do you mean by how you engage with the market? Are these measurements, by the way? Is it your brand value is how well engaged your audience are?
Yes, these are all KPI related, and they all can be scored. That's really how their methodology works. So number one, they talk about this idea of distinctiveness. So what have you got in your portfolio that's unique, that's ownable, and therefore can be remembered, by customers, connected with by customers?
Yeah. Yeah. And then for the purposes of this particular study, they say relevance, you say resonance, you say tomato, I say tomato. But what's I know there's distinct difference. I was just making a joke. So from your perspective, what's the thing you need to how do they measure relevance? Yeah, basically. So how is that the value of the brand?
Yeah, they talk about three things, which is your presence, the degree to which you're talked about, social media coverage, brand recall.
So standard brand monitoring type things. Yeah.
And then the two interesting things, much more interesting things from my perspective, is the concept of trust, and then the concept of affinity.
Right. And are these sorts of things, I mean, I know that we're quoting from a study from Interbrand, right? And these are the metrics that they use. Do you recommend these are metrics that organizations you work with use? Or what would you say to an in-house team if they're measuring their brand? What are those things they need to focus on here?
I mean, I really agree with that. If you've got a measurement matrix that talks about internal and external leadership, by the people and the brand, engagement, which is about distinctiveness, coherence, participation, how much interaction you get with your brand, and then relevance, which is all of the presence, trust, and affinity. That could be your customer loyalty measures. It could be your net promoter score. It doesn't really matter what the measures are, but the important thing is you have a matrix which gets you to that brand value.
Yeah, and you're saying these are things we could all do. I mean, it's not just part of the Interbrand thing, is that we can start putting those metrics in for our brands and understand maybe in a more rudimentary way, but where we are in terms of leadership, engagement, and relevance.
Completely.
That's cool. And then normally, like when I chat to you, you've always got great examples. So what are your examples today of some brands that are doing this really well? How are they doing it?
So I'll give you a couple of examples, and I'm going to start with Microsoft. So I've worked
very well.
Worked with them for many years as a client. So what's really interesting is that in the top 100 from Interbrand this year, they are one of the fastest growing, which for a company that's that well established is a little bit surprising. So they're currently valued at $278 billion. So that's their brand valuation.
Right.
And what I kind of know about them and what they've been recognized for over the last couple of years is really doubling down on that resonance and leadership part of the combination. They pretty much got engagement done. Yeah, they pretty much own desktops in the world and most of the cloud services in the world now. So if you look at what they've been doing as a brand, they're really focused in on driving trust in their products and really addressing ethics and how technology should be about enhancing the human condition and about enhancing the world, not just about driving more sales or more purchase or more brand awareness.
Yeah, I can imagine that's why they're accelerating up the their brand is getting more valued, because they didn't start from a great place from that, did they? There's a lot of work there to be done.
I mean, a lot of it is kind of under, Satya Nadella's kind of purview. He really moved things forward. And one of my favorite kind of quotes from him says, "Our actions must be aligned with addressing the world's problems, not creating new ones."
I think there's a few big tech billionaires that need to focus on that last part of that sentence, right?
Yeah. And what I really like about that is that it's really suggesting that technology should not be about replacing what people do. It should be enhancing what they do, making, lives better, whether that's through more productivity or it's through furthering, the climate change board. But it's all about the mindset of the brand, not to focus on improving the product or the service or anything else, which is what they spent the last however many years doing. And now kind of focusing on that higher order values.
So
and there's significant improvement.
So they're transitioning from being a product-based marketing type features, functions, we can do this and all that kind of, and new product launches, to actually trying to move their brand to mean something different for their consumers, like more on that hearts and minds type of thing.
Totally. And for their employees as well. Because again, I think that comes down, when you think about leadership, the Interbrand thing talks about, clear direction, clear alignment across the organization. And again, I know that's something that, Satya really focused on, that making sure that, not just he is seen as a leader, but everyone within the organization and, is following in that pursuit. So he really made a huge difference in kind of pivoting the organization, which is now being continued by the current and whole leadership. So it's about getting to trust.
Right. So that's, like you say, it's those two things they focused on out of the three you named. So you named leadership, engagement, and relevance. They really focused on relevance, being relevant to their consumer through the consumer's values, right? More than what they actually, their needs in terms of product. And from a leadership perspective, what Microsoft does, I love that, not creating new problems, which is, again, something I think a lot of billionaires could focus on. So that's Microsoft. So who else has struck you that's doing pretty well in this space?
Well, I kind of thought long and hard about whether I really wanted to focus in on this one or not. So I'm going to separate the leader of this organization from the brand itself and talk about Tesla. So again, Tesla is one of the fastest growing valuations from a brand perspective.
Right.
And again, what's interesting, it's very closely aligned to what's happening with Microsoft, but they're focusing much more on this idea of affinity and presence within the category. Right. So if you think, sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. I was going to make a joke about leadership, but that's fine. Of the three things, one of them is slightly, not quite right. But as a brand, they're certainly leaders. I shouldn't.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they lean into is that a big part of choosing Tesla is this idea of making the right choice also a desirable choice.
Yes.
So that you've got this affinity with environmentalism, etc. And what they've done incredibly well is to make that exciting and exclusive and interesting and luxury.
Absolutely. And I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they were talking about Tesla, and people don't buy Teslas because they're electric and because they're green. They buy them because of what they say about them and the desirableness. Exactly what you're saying is they've managed to combine this really well with the values of a particular demographic who have the money to buy Teslas. And you're quite right. That brand promise that they're making, it really resonates with those consumers. And it just so happens it's an electric car.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about leadership, engagement, and relevance. I mean, those are not all created equal. And I think that, the core message is that whole affinity marketing, trust, and empathy are kind of really critical things that a brand like Tesla really personifies.
It's funny, I saw a tweet the other day, and it had two guys next to a Tesla, and it said, these are the two people that really invented Tesla. So I think you're quite safe to distance yourself from Elon when talking about Tesla, because it's a huge organization, isn't it, of people that created these things.
Absolutely. So, and I think they've got some really, interesting numbers. So for me, they're obviously they've got their truck that's coming out. and they've not even got any in production yet. It's an idea, it's a concept, and they've got 1.2 million reservations for it, which is worth about
amazing.
8 billion in revenue.
Wow.
It's not even built yet.
Yeah. And that's pure on brand, isn't it? That's pure on brand promise, and that these people are putting up their deposits on the belief that this brand will deliver the experience they're expecting, and this experience happens to be a truck, right? So, that's amazing. So that's cool. So that's Tesla and Microsoft. That's splendid. And I think we're almost out of time there, Liz. So 2 questions. One is, where are people going to find you when they spin the dial on the interwebs?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. Liz High usually gets to me pretty much first time. And also you can find me via the book website, which is www.thinklikeabrandbook.com, or else you can find me on Twitter under brand before the letter B, the number 4, bank.
Splendid. And I'll include all those links in the show notes. Thank you very much, Liz. And shall we do this again next week? What do you think?
Yes.
See how we feel about the football, maybe.
Yeah. Mind completes the picture when we have won the group and progressed. Okay?
I love that. All right. I'll see you then, Liz. I'll see you next week. So that's a wrap on this episode of Think Like a Brand, our midweek mini-series for the Rockstar CMO F'in Marketing Podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Liz for her insight, and for you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and driving along. You can find all our contact details and a link to Liz's book in the show notes, and we are Rockstar CMO on all the socials. And if you like this, please help share the good news with a rating or review in your favourite podcast. I'll be back with our usual show on Saturday. Hope you'll join us for that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week. And thanks again for listening to Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.